a different test than just the single paragraph one. And if you want to use this as a way to see if you test the same, one thing I realized is that if you look at this Riso-Hudson one, it's really important to spend time with each paragraph, because I mistyped myself because I read quickly and didn't really look at some of the nuances in it. So just take your time going through any of the paragraphs. And if you still are sort of struggling with, this isn't me, I can't figure out anything, then sometimes that's a normal thing that happens. But do take the time to look at each paragraph, and never, as I said before, never look for 100% match. It's more a tone of the feel, because each of the paragraphs has a different tone to it.
And then you have the scoring mechanism.
I have the scoring mechanism for that. Which you don't need to give it to me. I can just give you the scoring mechanism for that right now, for this. And I wanted to, do people have access to the paragraphs that we gave out that first week? Because I can also just tell everybody what paragraph corresponds with each number, because in that would be with each paragraph, because then that can give you a little feel for, but in terms of this one, the Riso-Hudson one, where you pick a favorite, one set of paragraphs, you pick your letter, your preferred letter, and you do the same with the other. AX is type 7. And I have copies of this if you want this thing again. AY is 8. AZ is 3. BX is 9. BY is 4. BZ is 5. CX is 2. CY is 6. CZ is 1. And do you want them for this other one as well? Would that be helpful? Do you have this? Yeah, it's fine. Okay. So I thought that what we could do, we could continue to have people who, if you're fairly clear about your type, to introduce yourself to us using some of the descriptions in this handout of each type that I've given you, just so you can say, hey, yeah, these are the things that resonated with me enough in this that let me know pretty clearly that I am a 2 or I'm a 6 or whatever. Just so we can see how it plays out in you and how you relate to it. And if there are areas in the type you can say, yeah, I'm pretty sure I'm a 4, but this is an area that is not, yeah, this didn't ring as true. Because as I said, it's never going to be 100% match. So are any of you, some of you did this last week. This week, are there some of you who are willing to say, as I look at this, this is the type I am, and tell us why. Tell us how this describes sort of how you experience the world. Yeah, Sue.
Okay, I'm going to bring out the one part that just really floored me. So I am solidly a 9. I mean, it makes me kind of cringe. I was like, but the
9s are good.
says the 9.
I was gonna say.
But the 9s don't like to think that anybody makes them angry. And so I try to look at, same thing it says here, I try to look at everybody's point of view, blah, blah, blah. But my neighbor just can set my teeth on edge. Now get this. She's 93. I run errands for her and get groceries and take her places. And this is hilarious when I saw this. But she wants to tell me every single step. So she wants to tell me that I need to go to Chase first, and then I need to go into Kroger, and I need to start at the south end, and I need to go, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm just like, and I'm thinking, Sue, she's 93, so what? But I bristle every single time she tries to, and it says right here, control what I do, and I have never understood that, because, and it just cracked me up when I saw it. Now, it doesn't really tell me why I do that, but I do it. And I just am stunned to even see it in print. It's like, why does that get under my skin? Me was trying to be this, oh, let's all get along, blah, 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 blah. But when she starts to tell, or she'll lean over when we're driving and then try to say that I'm going too fast, and I'm like, what? Or I want to go to Kroger then and do it in the opposite direction that she told me, and I'm thinking, that's really adult. So, but is that my little passive aggression that I do, which is the next thing it says, which is the way I handle that anger, and I'm like, oh, I don't even like seeing that in print. But anyway, I was just floored because, yeah, I'm definitely a 9, even that part of it, so I'm gonna try to be better.
Are there other aspects of it, as you look at the other descriptions of it, Sue, that
Oh, yeah.
that kind of resonate? Because I think it's just helpful for us to, get a little deeper sense of that.
Yeah, where's the thing? Yeah. Where is it? Insensitive, yeah, keeping things peace and quiet, containing my anger, absolutely. Try to see everybody's, where was it that said, try to see everybody's point of view, try to merge with others rather than stand out. I mean, all of that, very much where I'm comfortable. So, and it worries me a little bit because it sounds a little bit like a doormat, but yeah.
And that is why you look at the areas of development.
Yeah.
To see that, yeah, it can lead to people feeling like a doormat.
Well,
And to feel like you are just a prime chameleon.
Yeah.
Because you.
And that's by choice, that's where I was comfortable, but then I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Yeah, this was.
Because it says, what I came to believe, instead, when you look at sort of under the first section of the basic proposition, that whatever happened in some of your growing up experiences, you came to believe that people need to blend in. That peace happens when we kind of can't we all just get along kind of an idea. But what that does is, I mean, then that buries your voice or your experience when you really feel something is very different than what people around you are saying or authority figures are saying should be.
Mm-hmm.
You might have a very different experience, but it's like your voice is cut because how did you experience anger in your family growing up
Oh, that's interesting. My mother had a really difficult, just, yikes, because she was grown up. So she made sure that we saw none of that. There were never any conflicts. She and my dad, they would take them completely away from us. So anytime I'm around conflict, I will tell you that I just want to run. I don't know that I really learned how to, I think because there was so much wrong in her bringing up, she just, I think, tried to compensate, which I think good. But, yeah.
So anger then, if somebody feels anger, what happens? What
To
was your
me?
experience about what happened just to
I try
them?
to look for the way out. Physically out of the room.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because if you stayed,
I don't know.
do you have a sense of what
I
would
don't know that I've
happen?
ever stayed to find out.
Yeah,
I in that state, either physically or even
Yeah.
mentally, it's like, okay, think it's something else. La, 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 la.
yeah. So, I mean, again, talk about making sense and not as say you and it's a way to show compassion for yourself to say, I was never shown that anger was something that could be dealt with in a healthy way or that could be expressed in a healthy way. But I learned that anger was something that the adults hid.
Yeah.
So it must be really bad.
So get ready, everybody, on property, if I get angry.
I'm looking at how I can support that in terms of being on property, let's see.
Encourage you to express your own position. I don't care. I remember, I remember when you were having your kitchen remodeled.
Oh. And I had to make decisions.
I'm like, she's right, and I'm like, okay, then for handles, how about some bright brass filigree?
Yeah, she was just like, oh.
No.
I know what
You
I
did,
did.
I'm like, you do have opinions.
Yeah. You brought out the most extreme.
Oh, yes, I
Yeah.
just thought that was like.
Just so
I
she would
didn't-
say no,
Yes,
right?
yes, so,
But,
and,
yeah.
and so I gave her a suggestion.
Which was awesome, yes.
Which is in her kitchen now, but yeah,
Did,
like,
did you know that would be something she didn't want?
Oh,
So
oh,
you
yeah.
were kind of baiting?
yeah, I was baiting her to acknowledge.
That's what friends are for, right?
And truly, I don't know what I want, I know what I don't want.
Right.
Yeah, and then instead of bright brass, I suggested something this color in a very plain, not shaker style
Uh-huh. And they work great.
But yeah, this is amazing. Yikes.
Other things that you see that resonate. In particular at all. Especially as part of your community, when you look at how I can further my personal development and how others can support my development at the very end. How true do those feel?
Oh, that one that says, notice feelings that may be blocking out when I turn to, and here we go, TV, food, errands, and chores, bed.
Under how you can further your personal development. Yeah.
Because that's what I'll do, I'll just fill things up if I, yeah, I mean, if I'm reading it right. Accept discomfort.
Yeah, who wants to embrace discomfort, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I think for any of us, as we're living this, I mean, one thing to pay attention to is what do we seek to avoid? Because that said, I mean, what I find myself avoiding clearly is something that scares me, that makes me anxious, that presents a threat in some kind of way. And it's almost,
Just discomfort.
unless it's really unhealthy, stepping into that discomfort can be a real area of growth for us, right?
Yeah.
Even though we don't embrace doing it. But it's like that can say, because when we're able to step into, like when you're able to express anger. Yeah, I know, it's a great, yeah. And it doesn't destroy anything. But the person actually goes, oh, or you say to yourself, I really care about this.
Yeah, but I don't
And,
really
you know,
care
the
about
world-
Kroger.
You what?
I just don't want her in my state. I said, I don't really care about which way I go through Kroger, but I don't, like I said.
Yeah. And that can be an interesting, playful question to go say, boy, I wonder what's going on with, you know, I wonder if you could ask her, why do you care about this, huh?
I suspect Irene might be a one.
There is a way to do it, right?
Yes.
There is one way to do it. And it's the right way. She's just trying to bless you
Oh,
with that wisdom.
with that knowledge.
So you
Yeah,
don't
because
mess
she tells
up,
me that.
Sue.
Because she's trying, yes.
I know, I'm like,
She might have her grocery list in that order.
she does.
She does.
Well, but
Yeah,
see,
there you
but then she won't get all her things. I mean, there's a chance of missing something if,
But it's something that you feel the need, if it works for you, that to feel that it will work that way for everybody, right? So you should do this.
I don't know why, but it's like, I don't want her to tell me the order I do stuff in. It's like, what do I care? That's all.
Yeah, yeah.
But are you doing it for you or doing it for her?
Doing what? Oh, doing the
Following
errands?
her instructions.
Not following her instructions. I take her to groceries, I just don't do it. Yeah, that's my passive aggressive. Is that what that is? Kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of sort of directly saying,
Hey, sure.
yeah. And like, you know, we always have to pick our battles, right? You know? And it's like, how much does this matter?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, so what deeper battle
I know, but
are you masking with your frustration about Kroger instructions?
I don't know, because so far, nobody else has really gotten up in my grill. Is that what it is? So to speak?
Up in my grill.
Yeah. It's like, and it's ridiculous. But points for any therapy. I don't know if Chuck's still practicing.
Anything else?
No, just that. I was
Okay.
just surprised to see in print so much.
Isn't it something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was concerned that many of them focus on anger. But I didn't perceive in the other paragraphs, other emotions. I guess I would say as strong as anger, or maybe that's an issue that needs to be dealt with universally.
Yeah, what do you think about that in terms of, because that is when they look at stress and anger, they look at stress and anger as common human realities.
Anger is quite often, I think anger is quite often a mask for fear. And fear, historically has kept us alive. So it's one of those basic needs.
And people talk about, some schools of psychology talk about depression as withheld rage. Others talk about it as learned helplessness. Like, but withheld rage, that sort of say, I don't express, I'm not expressing anger, so I absorb my anger. And that can become, that can turn into some schools of counseling psychology think that can become depression.
What do you
Yeah.
think?
Brad?
Back to 796 for one, this is one.
Yeah.
But so there's a continuum of rage being sort of the absolute just expression to some irritation about why whatever, and anger. But the notion that anger is a secondary emotion you feel after having felt somehow injured or hurt.
Yeah.
So that makes some sense to me, that what this is saying is, in what ways do you experience being hurt?
Yeah.
And then respond to that with some level of anger, whether it's, listen, I felt a little put out, so I'm mildly irritated, or I felt absolutely threatened and hurt by that, and enraged by it. But sometimes I felt totally threatened by something that wasn't really that big of a deal, but then I've got a misperception going on if I'm responding out of rage. And then there's the business of right wrath and wrong wrath. I mean, you can feel hurt for justifiable reasons. You get angry about that. That's a good.
Yeah, it's a good
I'm
thing.
not sure that's all accommodated here, maybe, but
Yeah, but I think that notion of, I mean, if you think about what makes you really angry, there is something that you deeply care about that is at risk. I mean, you're angry that something has happened, looking at the Supreme Court decision, for example, to the extent that some people are deeply angry about that decision. That is not simply coming out of a vacuum, but you see, at least I would imagine, part of it is you see the cost of that. You see the values that have been violated by that decision. So part of that anger is, look what's going to happen. Look at the vulnerable people, and look what that this is a right that men have decided women should not have.
I think there's a connecting thread there about a loss of freedom. I feel hurt. So at a mild level of, you're not going to let me make my own decisions about where I go first. I mean, I don't have the freedom of autonomy to do that. Well, it's not the biggest deal in the world. But then you get to a point, like you're mentioning it, that's a very serious sense of having freedom lost. And then if you're held up in a dark alley, you might have rage, and because your freedom is suddenly completely constricted. Or if you get a diagnosis of a terminal illness, anger, I can't be autonomous anymore.
Julie and then Rich.
I
And
think
be sure to speak loudly for the folks. Are you at home hearing these comments okay?
It's
Yeah.
just a little hard to hear, but
A little hard, okay?
I think-
Yeah, so just speak loudly, please.
It's pretty vague.
Go ahead.
Trying to follow.
I think that anger is also something that as we, from, if you think of it from when we're a kid, that we don't have as much control over our emotions and, so I had a stroke when I was 55 and I did not have, things could make me angry in a flash, things that didn't matter a lot. So I went from being a fairly reasonable adult to talking to somebody about a bill at the hospital. And I mean, the first thing that was like, that I either didn't understand or I was like full blown angry. It was like totally foreign. But I think that there's, the pathways and that just stroke just upset and I had to kind of learn to control my emotions again. I had to get those pathways
Yeah.
in my brain reestablished. So I think that, if there's something like that that's always made you angry, it has formed into whatever you suppress or whatever. That's one thing. But I also think that physically.
Yeah, there's
something can happen.
physiological changes. So it's not just a matter of sort of psychological formation, but any physiological changes that add to that.
We'd have had an interesting time doing an anagram on me at that time.
Wow.
What makes you
Everything.
Why are you asking me these questions?
Rich, what were you gonna say?
Well, talking about anger, it's been sort of a long journey for me to at least start to come to terms with my own anger. I went to a career counselor about 40 some years ago, and I filled out a bunch of stuff for him. And he, at some point in our conversation, he informed me that I have a problem with anger. And I remember I had no idea what he was talking about. What, me? I'm not angry. I didn't know what he meant, but I sure have learned over the last 40 years a lot about my anger. And I think it probably comes from when I grew up. The answer to my anger that I was given was just don't do it. Don't get angry. Don't get angry. Anger, you just don't do it. And so I think I probably learned to deny it. And so sometime gradually from starting around 40 years ago, I came to realize that, yeah, I do have a problem with anger. And it was because I never recognized it or, had no way to cope with it other than to say, well, don't do it. It's bad.
Yeah.
So it's been a long journey and I'm still on the journey, of course, but.
And Suzanne, I wonder if that is focused on in here, not only because some of what Brad said around just that it is a secondary emotion, that it reflects hurt and threat, but because each type sort of expresses it in some different ways. It's sort of a way perhaps to identify ourselves, because when we read what makes us angry, there's some really, if you sort of look at the 9 types and look at the things that make them people angry and how that's expressed, it's very distinctive.
And also during this discussion, I just thought about when his series on the 7 different sons, and we went through some developmental stages. So much of it goes back to early stages of life, and we had this series on trauma. It's becoming more evident now. The startups are really, really important.
Yeah.
And they do have long-term effects.
And the invitation to let ourselves get in touch with those feelings without judging them or fearing them so much that we suppress it. But that is the way through, right? The only way, there's no way around, right? It's through. And that can be very, very, very scary. Others of you, in terms of introducing yourself to us like Sue just did through your type, and telling us a bit about what it is about the description of that type that resonates with you. How this helps you understand. Did you want to go for your one there,
Sure.
Michelle?
Sure. Hi, I'm Michelle. Really? No surprise anybody? Let's see. Doing things the correct way, meeting the standards, following the rules. Self-criticism and others' criticism. Getting things right. Maintaining standards. Everything I can to avoid making mistakes. Losing self-control.
I can't hear Michelle at all.
Oh,
Okay.
hello.
Are both of these on?
Yeah.
Okay, let's
Yeah,
let's scoot-
sorry,
let's scoot this-
I'm muttering about my.
we can scoot this down to the yeah, just pass that down. Thanks for letting us know or no.
Well, thank you for making sure we can hear her.
Yep, I wouldn't want to make a mistake or or below standard. What causes me stress, not being able to quiet my internal critic. Too much error to correct. Too much must be done right. What makes me angry, unfairness, irresponsibility, things being done the wrong way, flagrant ignoring or disobeying of rules, and being unjustly criticized. Yeah. I was also looking at some of the things in 5 because that's my secondary one. What makes me angry, being considered factually incorrect. If I gave you an answer, that is the answer.
The answer.
Yeah. How can I further my personal development? Appreciate that there is more than one one right way.
You can't even say it, can you?
Accepting imperfections in myself and others. Practice forgiving myself and others. I am getting better about allowing free time for pleasure and relaxation. My internal critic not accepting improvement is good enough or fast enough. Yeah, if I can't get it the first time, it is really tough to keep trying. Yep. And I would say my mother is 100%, was 100% the same. And I would guess that her mother was as well.
And so what is it like growing up in a family where a parent is a perfectionist?
Don't set the table wrong. Don't vacuum the furniture wrong. Don't dust the wrong way. I can turn around and say, don't hang my clothes back up in the closet because you don't put them back right.
Wow.
Because for some reason, my mother's closet was a freaking disaster. Mine has order and it's still the same. But yeah, she did laundry. Bless her, always did the laundry. It's one of those things I didn't actually learn how to do because mom wouldn't give up the control of it.
You couldn't do it right.
Yeah, apparently. She never really taught me to cook because she couldn't give up the control of it.
Really?
Yeah, as much as I love to cook.
She wouldn't teach you the right way to do it.
I could stand there and watch her, but I couldn't try it myself.
So if you look at what I came to believe instead on that sheet, instead of believing that we're all perfect as we are, is there some resonance then in what I came to believe instead?
Well, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because that, if you
Sure,
look at
that's
that category for
self-evident.
your type, that can help you just sort of, that should reflect a bit about, this is what growing up in my household was like. And again, it's not about casting blame. It's simply trying to understand. Because we do the best we can most of the time, right?
Right, and there, I think that there wasn't a question of love.
Yeah.
And one of my nieces and I have talked about this. But there was a sense of disappointment.
Were you an only child?
Yes and no. I was the only of my parents' children, but mom was married before and had 3 kids, and dad was married before and had 2 kids. So in the house I grew up in, my nearest sibling was 18 years older than me and was like another mom. And yeah. Yeah. It's still tough to talk to her on the phone. Yeah.
Michelle, I have a question for you.
Yeah.
With your mom telling you you can't do this right and you can't do that right, you can't keep your closet clean, you can't do the dishes right. So after she told you that once, did she allow you to do that stuff? Because me growing up, my mom said, you can't do dishes right, so don't worry about doing the dishes. I'm going to do the dishes.
Oh, I think the tasks which she assigned me, even if she criticized how I did them, those were the tasks I was assigned. And then the
But each
tasks,
time you did them, did you get told you didn't do it right?
maybe half the time. I don't know, the memory is fuzzy. But then there was just other stuff that I didn't do, didn't get asked to do. That was her thing.
So much seems to be in the vocabulary negatively. Don't do this, don't do that, rather than being more positive and providing opportunity to learn, because we learn from our mistakes.
Yeah.
We learn from our
Yeah,
mistakes.
but yeah.
Well,
yeah,
that's called
I don't
life. It's a
wanna make
crapshoot.
I don't want to learn from a mistake because I don't want to make the mistake in the first place. And I really still have a problem with that. I mean, I know that you're correct in my head,
Yeah.
but it makes my heart beat fast.
So when are you able to, what helps you forgive yourself or not beat up on yourself when you make a mistake? Or when another person makes a mistake, what keeps you from judging them or thinking less of them or getting angry with them?
I think that I'm much more likely to forgive somebody else than myself.
Yeah.
Although I might blow up first. I'm afraid I'm a little I can be snappy,
Uh-huh.
which does more damage than, oh no.
Says a good friend.
Yeah, and I apologize to everybody I've been snappy at.
Because what happens? What's going on that,
Makes me snap.
yeah. That need for, the mistake, the possibility of a mistake. whether-
It's that, something isn't going the way I envisioned it going, or the way I thought somebody was gonna do something, or how I planned it, and that's just, the momentary end of the world. And then, of course, the world goes on and I can, you know, take a deep breath and maybe apologize and keep going.
But it feels that it's that drastic, the momentary end of the world, if it doesn't turn out the way that you thought it was going to.
Yeah, the adrenaline just, depending on the overall tenseness of the situation.
And this
And
is
I-
learned behavior, right?
Pardon?
This is learned behavior that
Oh.
technically you learned from your mom, because if you didn't do it the way she wanted it done, it wasn't done well enough.
I think just
Yes,
to make
no.
sure that that's a piece of it, I mean, the nature nurture piece, again, but that's
And there's
certainly,
pro-
it's certainly,
there's
it's
probably
certainly
some
a
genetic,
factor.
there's probably some genetic
Um,
thing there. We listened to This American Life.
That or on which one?
I think it was This American Life a couple of months ago, that was about these kids who were switched at birth, but they lived in the same town. So they knew each other, and one of the moms knew what had happened, and it was weird. But they were like from totally opposite families with totally opposite personalities. But each individual girl was so much like her birth family,
Wow.
and they didn't understand
um,
why they didn't quite fit in
yeah,
the family they grew up in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I know that there's some
yeah,
bits. So yeah, my nephew-in-law said to me at one holiday, we were setting a big table for a big Christmas or Thanksgiving or something. And I was doing whatever, I was laying out the silverware or whatever. And he's like, do you need help with that? And I'm like, oh, I got it. He's like, are you like my wife and my mother-in-law? I'm like, yes, I am like your wife and your mother-in-law and your grandmother-in-law. We all have it. So sorry for your luck.
Now, is behavior learned or is it hereditary then?
Yeah, that's a good question.
yes.
Yeah.
I think we try to avoid ors as much as possible. It'd be nice if things were really easy,
Yeah.
but yeah, we're a mix.
Yeah.
All of us are a mix.
And I can be, and this is probably from my father's side a little bit more, I can be, if you let me know things are going to be fluid, like depends on the weather or depends on what time I get out of this, we might do that or we might do this. I'm like, okay, I have a different expectation level than we are going to go on a picnic today,
Yes.
or we are going to go to the movies. And then it doesn't happen and it's like,
I learned to give up expectations because then I won't be disappointed. And I've learned to
Can I have a
let
blood
life
transfusion?
happen.
What did you say?
I've learned to let
Yeah.
life happen. And it's wonderful if you can deal with surprises and unexpected kinds of things.
Then I asked if I could have a blood transfusion.
Exactly. That's what's so fascinating about this.
And what is your number?
Me?
No.
No, the
Suzanne,
lady
yeah,
that was
you know,
just
Suzanne, what you
speaking,
are?
what is her
Well,
number?
I couldn't do last week's because I couldn't find the little sheet of paper I picked up last Sunday, so I don't know yet.
And did you do the other one?
Yes, first week it was HFC, the second week it was HCF,
But H was your first one?
correct.
So H is a 7. I'm an optimistic person who enjoys coming up with new and interesting things to do. Yeah, 7s are open-ended. 7s enjoy variety. 7s are optimistic in general. They tend to be more glass half full kind of folks. They struggle with pain. It's hardest for 7s. And again, you have lived a long life and you have learned and adapted in a lot of things. The 7s I have known who are not as, I think as reflective and willing to change. They did whatever they could. If they felt that they had caused someone pain, or if they were having to deal with pain that perhaps they have contributed to causing somebody else, absolutely fell apart. They did everything they could to avoid having to face either pain that they were feeling or pain that perhaps they had contributed to others. They can sometimes be the ones who sort of say, you'll get over it, it'll be fine. Because they don't want to sit with the pain in another person. But sometimes it's almost more the personal pain that is just really, really a challenge for them. I don't know if any of that sounds familiar at all, but the H is a 7. And so maybe, do you have this thing through Sam?
Yes, I have the first weeks. I don't have last week's.
Okay, well, this week, this was not, do you want to pass that down? That was not handed out the first week. So between now and next time, read through the 7 and see what, see if 7 looks somewhat familiar. Others, yeah, go ahead.
Michelle,
Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask you a question about your expectations in life? Have you ever been surprised that something didn't go as well as you expected it to?
Yeah. Didn't go as well as.
Something did not go as well as you, I can't think of a time when I have ever been surprised that something didn't go as well as I expected it to. Because I have, I always assume that there's going to be some kind of glitch in everything. So I never expect something to go really well.
I assume people are gonna do what they're supposed to
Wow.
the right way.
I
And
never
then it doesn't, and they don't. And I mean, I've learned to kind of temper that, but I mean, my first thought is that this will be good. The things that people will
That's
follow their thing.
One thing I did is I went through and ranked how much I felt I had in common with the different types. I'm a 5, and I got a pretty strong 1 and 9 going too. So I think I understand a little bit of that perfectionism. I asked you about.
For some reason, you guys aren't coming in at all. I can't hear what you're saying at all.
Is that better?
Okay. Is that one on?
Yeah.
Okay.
No better for me. I can hear Alan when he had talked.
Maybe you mean Rich.
Kathy now?
Well, I think it's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. I'm not sure what's happened. Can others of you hear?
Now you're coming in again.
Okay. Who else has a number that you would like to introduce? Julie?
I was, I'm a 1 if I did it the one way, and I'm a 7 if I did it the other way.
Okay.
And so, 1 just, I read both of them, and the 1 is the one that I feel reflects me more. And the longer I sat with it, it also kind of struck me for my path in coming out. This being a lesbian was not a good thing. It
Not
was
following the rules.
Not the right thing. It was, it was, and I dealt with that. I suppressed that for 27 years of my life until I was well into falling in love with Judy. So it was like, just didn't. My mother actually said something to me 6 weeks before I realized I was gay. Judy came to my parents' house with me, And we slept in the same bedroom. And Mom said, there are plenty of beds. Why are you sleeping in the same bedroom? I said, she made some comment. I said, oh, Mom, you know me, I sleep around with everything, men, women, doesn't, I mean, it was just like, there was no, that had no meaning to me. 6 weeks later, I'm like, but, so my childhood, if you had known me before, I lied a lot. So the integrity was, you know, which is a big part of what I feel. I have always looked at that and just looked at those years from early teens to when I was 27 as just unconsciously not knowing how to be truthful, and be truthful to myself, you know. So when I realized it, I started meeting with my pastor. I went to a counselor. It's like, this feels, I mean, to me, all those pieces of puzzle just came into focus like a jigsaw puzzle that was all scattered into pieces and was like, phew. But I thought, I'm not gonna, you know, I don't believe in this. I don't, you know, it's like, I am gonna go to counseling. I'm gonna go to meet with my pastor. I'm gonna, you know, challenge myself. But boy, this seems like my truth. And so Judy hadn't been in a relationship either. We dealt with that very differently. Within the first year, I had to tell my family. It was like, I can't start blind. It's, you know, and so things about one and integrity and, you know, they really fit with me. What makes me angry, unfairness, you know, but unfairness, I was an advocate for people with disabilities, and, you know, I was a passionate person on that. It was like, I have one of the other attorneys in the office was so good at, you know, just working with people who had not been fair to people with disabilities. I mean, I was like, all right, we're gonna get into it. So there's a lot of things about 7 that really do resonate for me.
What one you mean?
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
1. 7, what you were talking about with glass half full and the positiveness, that's certainly come out more as I've gone through life. I mean,
And next week, when I say a little bit more, I wanted us to take these couple weeks to get a feel for the type and just see if we find a point that feels that we're kind of at home in, that feels honest. But next week, we're going to do a little bit more getting into the weeds about the idea behind the Enneagram. One of the things we'll discover is that 1 and 7 have a relationship. Each of our points has a relationship with actually 3 other points, different kinds of relationships. So the fact that you might look at 1 and see how and feel a resonance with 7, according to the theory of the Enneagram, makes a lot of sense. Because you have, and part of that will be next week. I'll show you just the symbol, which is it's a combination of 3 different symbols. But that will show the relationships that each number has with 2 other numbers. So that will come next week. I wanted us to get used to just some of this language before we went into some of the weeds of it. Others of you have any, yeah, Brad.
I just have a question. So I typed out here as a 2. When I had done this in a cursory way before, I thought I was a 4.
Uh-huh.
A lot of 1 I resonate with, I don't know, whatever. But under type 2, the fundamental principle I lost sight of, wonder if you can expand on it. I just don't really understand this. Everyone's needs are equally and freely met. By whom, or what is that?
You really lost sight of it.
For each of the, yeah, I have to admit that, you know, each of these numbers has a fundamental principle I lost sight of. And they all seem kind of vague. And so if you look at what I came to believe instead,
Yeah.
does that give you an insight as to what the first one is trying to do? The second one for me always is much more helpful. When I read the first ones of these
No,
in general, I don't find it terribly helpful.
I think that's true, but as I looked at the other fundamental lost sight of principles, I could see they made more sense. So in terms of type 2, if I look at what I came to believe instead, then that makes me think that the lost sight of principle is thinking that I'm the one who needs to be part of having everyone's needs equally and freely met.
That's what the 2 comes to believe.
The giver.
That the giver believes that you have to give.
Right, okay.
But so the first one is that if everybody's needs are universally met, then it's not your unique job.
Well, right, but
Right?
does that imply in a, I mean, none of this I don't think is explicitly theological, so it's not saying God meets those needs.
No, it's sort of like in a perfect world, but
Sure.
the environment around you will meet those needs.
Well, that sounds like socialism then.
It's like emotional needs or physical, I mean, if it's all the needs, so basically, if to the extent that your world, as you grew up, somehow knew what you needed, knew what everybody needed,
Yeah.
and was able to some extent provide enough of that, so I don't feel that
Yeah,
no one's gonna meet my needs, or people are gonna rely on me to meet theirs.
Right.
Yeah, that's why I think, yeah, and a lot of that's sort of unique, I like this book for a lot of reasons. That fundamental principle I lost sight of is not one that I think is terribly helpful.
Okay.
I've not found many people to say, yeah, that nails it, or that really, no one ever says, I knew I was a 2
Okay.
because when I read the fundamental principle that I lost sight of, that just spoke so deeply, it's like, yeah, so that's not something that
yeah, it gets that, I mean, if that were worded as everyone's needs can be, it's possible, that would be something different to me. I'm glad to lose sight of the fact, that just seems, this probably says something about me. But, I mean, it seems preposterous to think that, I mean, I believe sin is real and people don't love each other, and so nobody's gonna get, any of us are ever gonna get treated equally and totally free, whatever. But then the problem is if you believe you have to step into that breach and fix everything, then I get that.
Right.
And then your needs are met by.
I'm a 2. And to
Okay.
me, when I read that, everyone's needs are equally and freely met, and that I lost sight of it. In my thoughts, I have lost sight that my needs are going to be met. That I'm out there meeting everybody else's needs and nobody's there to meet my needs. And that's how I've lost sight, is that nobody's out there to meet my needs. Does that sound?
Because when you look on that, the 2, what makes me angry, feeling unappreciated or uncared for, unmet personal needs and wants. So if you're able to admit, nobody, I'm doing all this stuff, I'm giving for everybody else, and nobody's paying attention to my needs, resentment builds from that. So Brad, say more about the 2 and does that still feel mostly you, or do you, when you say?
I think it's more true of me before I really started to work on my own stuff. So
Yeah.
this is probably all there, but I think I've been able to ameliorate some of these things. But that's where then there were certain parts of like the 4 and the 1 that I could also resonate with.
And 1 and 2 are connected to 4.
Oh, okay.
1 and 2, when we look next time at the map.
Yeah.
4, 1 and 2 are resonate with you. I mean, they go to each other, they're connected to each other. So that, yeah, that makes tremendous
yeah.
sense that you would find some of those resonances.
You said,
So going through life as a 2, what's that like?
Well, I look this completely, I think, well, they just described codependence here, basically. I think of that.
Yeah.
And I've been very aware of those tendencies in myself, but I think I've learned how to manage some of them. I mean, I've seen the unfortunate outcomes of some of that stuff. Good judgment comes from experience. Experience comes from bad judgment. So you learn. But and some of this, we know we've got a lot of codependent people in ministry who get into it because you want to feel good about it. You get feeling good because you help other people feel good. I don't really feel that that's been a major part of who I've been in ministry. Okay, I'm in denials and on the couch. Because some of those 1 characteristics also drive me in that sense. So some mixture of that. I can certainly see codependent traits in my mother, not so much of my father, but my mother's favorite Bible verse was "Blessed are the peacemakers." Okay, get that.
but that's a role of many women.
Huh? Yeah, so that's right. Their gender characteristics are baked in the pie somehow culturally too.
It's interesting because we're gonna close at 12:15, but I am a type 4, and I thought I was a 2 for the first, and the teacher for the class I was in thought I was a 2. And then I took the class 2 years later, and as I looked at it, some of the looking at the motivation for helping.
Right.
So for a 2, you help for the sake of helping. And you sort of see there's something in you that gets fed by helping other people. For me, the thing I realized as a 4 was that helping people was my way for intimacy with them. To build the relationship and to be close. So it wasn't helping for the sake of helping. It was helping for the sake, and it still had codependent aspects.
Right.
Because I would get close to fairly needy people, because then I knew that there'd be somebody who would want to hang out with me.
Yeah.
I didn't trust that healthy people would want to hang out with me. So I would offer to type their papers, I would offer to help them do all these things, not because I wanted to help, but because there would be time together, and they might like me. So sometimes looking at the motivation for doing something can sometimes help distinguish between a couple numbers if you are sort of struggling between what do we have, what do these have in common? Anything from anybody on the screen? Okay, Brad, did you want to say something?
I was gonna say, I think
Yeah.
a turning point for me in this was some years, toward the middle of my time at Trinity, I began to realize that it was always so easy to spend time with students who were troubled, and it was just wearing me out. People would come to me, and I realized, spending time with people who are already well on their way but can be taken even farther. I made a conscious decision. I'm gonna spend some time looking for and spending time with people who really have it pretty well together, but I've got some things that may help them take it to another level.
Yeah.
And that brought some balance into the teaching. And certainly when I was dean, I had to be really careful about not getting too absorbed in the really complicated. I mean, I had a colleague who used to say, all interesting people are complicated, but frankly, not all complicated people are all that interesting. It's burned out on that. So I had to learn to distinguish the difference.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the huge, when you talked about growth,
Yeah, right.
to give yourself the freedom to say, I don't need to focus all my energy on those who just sort of seem the most broken.
It only takes a couple of interactions with
people with borderline type issues to learn that lesson the hard way. I did.
Anything from anybody on screen who would, just anything you wanted to add as we finish up for the day? Okey-doke. So next time, like I said, we'll go into a little more about what some of the ideas around the Enneagram are, and the numbers that are connected to each other and what that might mean. And then we'll also leave room for a couple of people to continue to sort of share your type. Is there anybody who is still really lost about a point? Like just really, I don't mean lost in a pejorative, but just sort of say, if you ask me what my point is, my Enneagram point is, I really don't have a clue. Nothing really feels like it's. Anyone? Okay, great, thank you all.